So what I want to talk to you about today is, excuse me, I'm a little under the weather, but I'll make it. I want to talk about basically how not to design a dashboard, which you get a lot of advice how to do it. So it's kind of both lenses I'm going to try to show today, both how to and how not to, starting with the not to, and then branching in how to fix it. And this is based on a lot of dashboards that I've seen on LinkedIn and like my own first dashboard. Everyone makes the same mistakes. And the advice is based on a menagerie of sources. Some books are listed here, Storytelling with Data, which is a great one. And that's more for like static presentations. And the big book of dashboards is excellent for interactive dashboards. A lot of great info in there. If you want to step through this or give it to other people to kind of get their independent thoughts, they can go to this information to tab first, and that has kind of an unbiased just list of a very horrible looking dashboard. And then the next tab actually has the suggestions for corrections for everything that's wrong with it. So what I plan on doing here is, and let me know if there's something in that comes up in a chat. I am going to kind of go across kind of row by row on the suggestions here, and I'll pause at the end of every row to try to get through a little faster rather than pausing on each one. So top center here, I have first principles. So I'm probably going to rearrange this a little bit. It's being a little lagging. All right. So kind of two main points in any dashboard design is know your audience. And this is the term customer integration. So you really have to know the part of the business that you're working with in order to deliver up any worthwhile visualization or insights. So, and that starts with getting the actionable business questions. What do they want to know? What do they need to know to take action and run the business? And if you do that, that will drive adoption. And if you know those things, then you can design with clarity. And that's point two. That's really your other guiding star here. Clarity above all else is your dashboard understandable. And you will see how most of the stuff that I list here is related to that. So first point, upper left here, like I have this corporate logo. We really don't need it in the upper left. You may have to put it there for external marketing purposes, but if you have a choice, put it down in the lower right, like an artist's signature. We know through eye tracking, and I have links in many of these tips, right? So this is a link to a Tableau YouTube video and their eye tracking study. You can get more details about that. Basically, people reading a Z pattern down. This is prime real estate up here. You should really put the title or some other KPI right at the top and not waste it with a logo like that. Second point, this is lagging somewhat here. Oh, this is a point about naming. I don't know if you guys are actually using Tableau. If you are, you can click on this for advice on how to organize your sheets and name your sheets. So this is a point about naming, like this tab right here, information 2. It's just bad. Like you don't want to name anything 2 or 3 or something like that. Take time to think about what is it? What am I naming? How can I clearly label what is on my dashboard? Point 3. I'm probably going to go through here. You may see if you come back after a few weeks, I'm going to redo all these numbers and give it like a 2-letter explanation of what is behind the main thought behind each of these suggestions. But so this graph, the y-axis, you can't even read the label over here, right? The graph title tells us nothing. Obviously, it's a time series. You can see dates on the bottom that's going across time, and it's too vertically compressed. So I've actually been dealing with some data with like this recently, real world, where like everything was above the 99.5 percentile. So if I graphed it 0 to 100%, I wouldn't see any variation, right? So sometimes you have to adjust your axis to a non-zero based terminal point if you need to see that variation. And that's a judgment call. Um, and, and this graph also doesn't belong at the top. You can click on this image here. Will take you out to a set of Tableau templates, which you can use for your dashboards. This is a really good structure where you have a title or key business goal at the top, KPIs under it, then trends of those KPIs, and then supporting breakdown. So that top-down structure, you could flip it 90 degrees. There's some other templates out there, 90 degrees, but that is like, if you don't know how else to start, that is a good framework to work with. Also, this dashboard is scrolling vertically. I mean, it's a ton. In general, you want to try to avoid that if you can, because out of sight, out of mind, especially if the graphs kind of end right near the bottom of the visible area, people might not even, your users might not even think to scroll down. So you're better off with multiple tabs or navigational buttons to go to different areas. Now, in this hamburger icon in the upper right, that's where I like to put my filters, because typically I use a drop-down list like this, and you can't see all the items anyway. So you save a little bit of real estate by offloading your filters to another hidden hidden container. This is a container in a Tableau sense. You may also have parameters, which are a separate functional control in Tableau. I like to give them a different color, like this darker gray versus lighter gray, so that my users can differentiate them. And if there's some questions, I can show you some examples of the difference in that, in filters versus parameters. And actually, most of what I'm going to cover today, or am covering, is applicable to any dashboard, whether you're making in Tableau, Power BI, R Shiny, any of those. Lastly, I also, for this top row, I usually make a hover help, like on this question mark. This is a tooltip. And you can implement this in different ways, but I have help on every dashboard. I include definitions, any confusing points, warnings about the data, refresh schedule. If someone asks me a question from the business and I find out things aren't clear, I try to roll that into the help so that they can get the answers they need, and I can kind of keep my head down and keep working without a bunch of questions coming my way. So it's kind of in my own or your own self-interest to make good help on your dashboard. Excuse me. I will pause there for any questions or any points of confusion in what I just talked about. Hearing none, I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to start talking about graph choice here. And I want you to know I just posted on my LinkedIn page. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So today's post is about a research paper that talks all about different studies of data visualization and what works and what doesn't work. Definitely worth your time to go and look at that and get more details that support what I'm telling you here, so I'm not just making up all this stuff. So word clouds, like there's a use case for almost every graph, but not necessarily in a business dashboard. So if you're doing infographics, this may be fine, but it's not really good for business because you can't really see the difference in the sizes, the coloration, and it's very ambiguous here. And it's kind of crazy too. So in general, you want to have a restrained use of color, like this example below. And if you click on this, you can go out to the website of the big book of dashboards that I had recommended earlier and see some examples out there. And basically with the lesser color, it's less cognitive load for you to process the images, and also just less eye strain over time, because people are going to be looking at a business dashboard for a much longer period of time than they will an infographic, right? So there's different rules depending on what your visualization's intended audience is. Next time I'm doing this from my home computer. I've done a couple from there, and the lag is much less. Anyhow, bubble chart's kind of the same thing, right? Well, one point, keep your fonts consistent. So at the top here, we have our third font in the title. You want one consistent font across all your titles. And then for each of these subtitles, one thing consistent in all your graphs, your dimensions and measures, and your tooltips. Like each one of those classes of labeling can have their own font, but you don't want like multiple fonts and sizes and bolding for each of your different titles. Try to be consistent. Again, it just makes it easier. Clarity, right? Clarity is one of our first principles. The color we already talked about a little bit. And I said bubble charts, not so great for business because your eye cannot judge the size of a circle, right? Not very well. I tested myself on this with like one circle sized to just an arbitrary 100. And I wanted to see if I could judge the size of the other circles in the area. I'm pretty good at this stuff. And I was off by like 27%. So in general, if it's just comparative, you're better off with bars than circles. And I have multiple chart types listed at this link if you're interested in other values or other possible choices. Next up is probably the greatest point of contention in data viz, pie charts. I am a pie chart, what's the best way to say it? I'm not a adversary in absolute terms. I think pie charts have their use cases. I would say for the most part, I like to use them just for binary cases where the data has to be one value or another. So it's showing percent of whole. This is not showing up for me. So, all right, again, font is bad here. Unnecessary color change. The labels are overlapping. That's also a problem. So if you're going to use them, start your biggest section at 12 o'clock and have it wrap around your most salient section. If you're doing a binary, either on or off, and then have the alternate value in the other wedge. So again, multiple wedges are confusing because it's very hard to judge the size of one wedge against the other. And a lot of times you don't, if you have multiple slices, you don't have the space to label them. So it gets to be a real mess. And there are ways to reduce the colors in your dashboard and things like this. And you can check out this link for more information on that. So I will pause there. It looks like we have a question in the chat, and I am going to close one of these tabs here if I can. I can't get to, how can I unpin this thing? Well, we'll see. I will look at the chat. Oh, to create a dashboard like this. I'm trying to think the total amount of time that I spent on this. I know probably a couple days outside of work. And for a business dashboard, it may, with, you're going to have data prep, as assuming you have to do some data prep on as part of the effort, it could take you a few weeks to make a dashboard. The smaller and the simpler and the more readily available the data is, right, the easier it is. So there's going to be a range, and again, like the easier the graphs, I can bang something out simple in a few hours if the data is handy and I'm already using it. I know exactly what the customer wants. Otherwise, it could take iterations. It could take a lot of not just building it. I mean, level of detail calculations can get complicated, and then you probably want to validate against the database, and all that stuff takes time. Hopefully that was a coherent answer. Let me see if I close this, then I can close this, and then I can, that Star Wars thing is, hopefully closing those will help the performance here. That's why I was doing that. All right, gang, I'm going to move on. My first dashboard. This is kind of a title in the middle of the dashboard. Oh, hold on, I see the question. If there's a need to change the axis from starting at 0, like the time series example, where should this change be reported? I usually put that, like I was saying in the help section, I would put that as a warning up there so they can see it in the overview of the dashboard. Hey, here's a reminder, this time series is not a 0-based axis. All right, title should be at the top. Don't call a dashboard, obviously it's a dashboard. Color choice here. This is stoplight colors, and people with color deficiency, right? They're going to have trouble processing that. But if you go to these links, you can see if people are insistent, if your users really want a stoplight color system, there are shades of that are safe for people with color disability in their site. It's always something to keep in mind. Next one up is this gauge chart. These also, I mean, yes, you can see what's happening, but they take a lot of space for that big half circle. And a lot of people like KPIs to be done in bullet charts. This is kind of the gold standard for your top metrics across your dashboard. Typically, you'll have a goal, or maybe last year's if you're doing year-over-year numbers, right? Have that as a line, and then, what are your actuals versus that? And then you can break down with have shaded regions that are percentages of the goal, like I did here, every 20%. So you can read more about bullet graphs here. And a lot of what I'm telling you, I'm giving you like the most common use cases and like problems you could run into, but you could really think deeply, even about that, when to start a chart at 0, right? I believe that's under this link here. And this guy has decision trees that are like 8 different yes, no's to get down to what you should do. So if you want to really think deeply about it, you can click in that and get more details. All right. We're moving over to goal here. This goal kind of should be at the top of the dashboard. So it's misplaced here. And again, in that first example of the templates, right, I had that title, KPI, trends, and actionable breakdown. This is just another nod to that approach. So these should be at the top. And really, like, one of them has 1 significant digit. The other ones are like 8 or 9. I think 3 is usually enough. Like, people aren't going to be making a business decision based on 6 or 7 digits out. Also, make your KPIs big. If you have it at the top, don't make it just 10-point font, make it easy to read. So these are typically called headline numbers. So yeah, important to get those at the top. So that was 3 more pointers. Any points of confusion about those?
I do have a question about like choosing the right graph.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of teachers who encourage us to use several types of graph on like one dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say like best practice is to use lots of different types, or just use whatever best fits that data, regardless of if it's a bunch of graphs that are the same type of graph?
I would say, Jess, more B. Thank you for the question. I mean, it's going back to that clarity, right? If it happens to be that bar charts in every case are the clearest, go with that. If it happens that, bars supported by trends that are line charts, like this lime green thing here, well, you wouldn't make it lime green, but, do that. Sometimes scatter plots are the best. And I have at the, within here, some other links about chart choice that can help you with that. But yeah, I wouldn't make variety just for variety's sake. Let clarity
Okay,
guide you.
perfect. Awesome. I'll be sure to check out that chart tree and stuff.
All right, we got another time series here. And the problem with this is really, it's just too many lines. So a lot of times if you're in a final presentation for your dashboard, you're going to want to highlight just one line that's the most salient. And this one, it would be the top one. Unexpected server error. Here we go now. So the background is saturated. I think we beat that horse. The grid lines are also too prominent here. You don't really need and I made them like overly pronounced. You don't need them this dark, but also I would caution you, if you're going to have them, at least have them visible. Like older users like myself might have trouble seeing Tableau's default. They're pretty light. But the main point on this one is too many colors. So you might want to gray out all these, or what you can do is more effective is, especially if the endpoints aren't all too bunched up, is put a terminal label on each line, right? And then you can see what it's representing without them having to be multiple colors. All right, next one, these are box and whisker plots, and they have their place, but I would say more if you're talking to statisticians or doing a scientific dashboard. If you're dealing with standard business users, they get confused by them. And now, like, these originated, right, when it would be a pain to plot 100 dots, but Tableau can plot 100 dots, no problem. And we can just shade the different regions. So I would say, and you get a much better view of what the actual distribution is. So unless you have a good reason not to, I would go more with the dot plot here that shows the details of the distribution. In the scatter plot on the right, I don't know why I'm getting server errors. Sometimes you can replace a scatter plot with bars. It depends on what you're doing. I have another dashboard out here I encourage you to check out, because a lot of times in business, you're looking at rates of some entity over time. And there's a way, it's called gap to goal calculation, where you can convert what you would have as a scatter plot with like a percentage on one axis and some sort of volume measure, or maybe on your y-axis, convert that into bars with this calculation, and you can have a ranked series of entities and knowing which one you need to intervene with first. Definitely worth checking out, but beyond the scope of the talk today. I see another question here. Is it better to have a dynamic graph with a lot of information on it, or to have several but simple to understand? Gosh, I hate to keep giving you the consultant's answer. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that phrase. The consultant's answer is it depends, but I will say it again. So the more that you're going towards an executive final presentation, right, the more you want a simple graph with more annotations, more highlighting, color highlighting specific items. Also, the less sophisticated your users are, the more you want to go in a canned sort of dashboard. Now, if like I call myself an analyst because I build a lot of analytic cockpits for business analysts, right? So I'm more like the technical analyst that builds the dashboard, and they have a lot of dynamic graphs in them and control. So if you want an example of that, you can go out on my LinkedIn profile and check out under featured content. I have MBA stat comparator, and it has a lot of different controls in it. And that would be a good example of how parameters work and how you can make use dynamic sheet swapping, it's called, and dynamic coloring and things like that. Thank you, Sydney, for the link in the chat. Excuse me. So this is kind of an obvious point here, like legends. you should have them close to the graph that they are describing, right? To group them all together would be a mistake. And one tip, like if you don't want a dynamic legend, which you can have in Tableau, for instance, if I click the central, I believe I have this set up. It is, see how it highlighted everything in the center? That can be useful to users. But if you're not going to do that, and if the categories are static, you can put your legend just in colored text, right? If it's not going to change, you can save a little bit of space. You can put it right in the title. I do that fairly often in production dashboards. Next tip. This is a really common one among beginning users. This is a divergent color palette, right? We're going from shades of, a dark orange here to blue, but really we have all positive values, and this is sales. There's not really an inflection point in between here. So unless there is one, you should be using a gradient palette, just like all shades of blue. And really, if it's can be any value in here, you should let it change continuously and not have it being stepped values, because that can kind of distort your perception if they're near the boundary. Say it was like 4 different colors, that could distort your perception of a continuous variable. But again, like if it has a 0 and could go negative, like profit, then sure, it does make sense to have a diverging palette. So be careful on that. There's only 2 in that row, so I'm going to go a little bit into the next row. All right. There's a few things. I got to get this one to close up here. There it goes. So in this next chart with the bar chart, there's several things going wrong here. You don't need this level of detail. I shouldn't use that phrase. This many significant digits on an axis label, right? We have millions formatting available probably in most applications, so I would use that there. And Tableau specifically, you can get into some formatting issues. I'll let you read that at your leisure. This is non-zero based here, and this is a problem in this case because these are bars, right? So you pretty much almost universally do not want a non-zero based axis with bar charts, because people are always going to visually compare the length of the bar one to the other, and it can really lead to distorted view of the data. And yet it's kind of ironically like the favorite distortion used in mass media is to work that axis and have unrepresented bars. So I'll pause there for any other questions or points of confusion. All right, hearing none, I will keep moving. Again, I apologize for the lag here. Sydney, if I come back, I will do it from my home computer. I'm not sure what is causing the display lag here. All right. Oh, this is a labeling issue, right? We already have the axis label, right? We have the axis labeled over here and the value labeled here, and we don't really need it in both places. You can have it one or the other, and people in general, like, it doesn't have to be super specific here. It doesn't hurt to have it in both places, but you don't really need to. It adds a little bit more processing for you to take in the visualization. And if you are going to have it on the mark, again, you don't need this precision. You could rotate it to make it easier to read. Now, this other point, I'm just going to talk to avoid clicking a little bit. The point here is that there is not just double encoding, but triple encoding. So double encoding means recording information in more than one way. And that can help clarity. So back to our guiding principle of clarity, if you think your graph is more clear by by having both a color for the region and a column label down here for the region, and maybe that's okay, but it's not strictly not necessary. You're duplicating the information. Now this we actually triple encode because we have the region yet again on the mark label up here. So you definitely wouldn't want to go that deep. That's overkill. Now the map, oh, I zoomed in a little bit here. It's hard to tell what the issue is on the map, so I'll just speak to it. A lot of times in maps, and I kind of got off center here. If you know a little bit about US geography, hopefully it'll reload here. We can see that on this map, or we can't see it, but if you could see it, you would see that California, New York, and Texas are dark, right? Well, they also happen to be some of the most populous states. So this is showing total borders, total orders. And there's an old saying in like spatial realms that every map is a population map, right? So the places, all other things being equal, the places with the most population are going to have the most orders. So you kind of miss out if that's what you're doing. If that's the only view you have for your map, you almost always want an alternate view where you normalize by the population, and you can download, well, in the US, you can download it from the Census Bureau, that information, and pull it together. And then, say some lighter state here like Minnesota or something is doing something where their actual rate of orders per population is higher than the others, then you would see it, and maybe they're doing something that the other states could benefit from, and then those things will pop out a little better. So that is another common one to not normalize. So legend and y-axis label would be enough. The last bar. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want, wait a minute. And no axis value is necessary. Well, like the way I would do it is I wouldn't color code the region here because it's overkill. So on the X, I would have the region. I would probably give it a little more space so you can read it horizontally, right? And I probably would not have the Y-axis labeled other than maybe just the name sales. Although if you have sales in the title, don't even need that over there. And then I would rotate this and have this like $440K as the label on the top. Hopefully that's clear. All right, moving on. Again, I'm going to do as many of these as I can without clicking, so we avoid the clicking issues. This donut chart, they're okay, but I use them in limited use cases, just like the pie chart. I like to use them for percent of whole, like for a KPI, if it's something you know is going to be 0 to 100%, very good for that. People are used to looking at an analog clock and seeing how far around the hour we are. So the bad part is once you get into multiple wedges, you have the same problem as the pie chart. And really, like, the thing that guides your eye, knowing the size of the pie chart, is more so that inner angle, and we don't even have that inner angle here. So what's nice, again, is to have this if it's just a percent of whole, and it's nice to plot that percentage right in the middle of the donut chart. So good for KPIs. Above that, there's a lot of white space. So the general rule in dashboards is white space separates items, and borders group items. So right here we have a lot of white space for no purpose, so it's not really helping us. But keep that in mind if you want to conceptually separate things. Use white space. If you want to group them, put a border around them. In the center here, what we have is a problem with kind of trying to do too much. So in data viz, we use what's called pre-attentive attributes, right? Things that are guiding your eye. So we already have position here, right, with profit and sales, but we're also using shape and color and size, and it's just too much to take in. So you would be better off here because we have like category and I think region on shape or something. You can make this into what's called a trellis chart. So you can put the categories across X and the regions down Y, and then in each one of those, you have panels that each have an XY, right? And has its own scatter plot. So that's a way to offload complexity and make it a little easier to digest. And there are links in here into how to do a trellis chart. All right, now we're getting to kind of the bane of most data visualizers. You will have people ask you for a detail level like this. What I like to do for something like this is have it be click-through detail. So that in some other graph, if someone wants the nitty-gritty, they can get to it on another view or another tab in their dashboard. Some other issues here, like if you were going to zebra stripe, like the data is here, I wouldn't use this crazy bright blue. Some shade of gray is probably best. And again, like I said earlier, I don't know if you can even see this word visible, but that's Tableau's lightest gray. I would avoid that one again because some people just can't see it. Tableau specific issue here, it will only row band to the rightmost row dimension. To get it to go the whole way to the leftmost, you have to just go in and make an adjustment to the settings. Again, your users will demand this type of chart. What you can do is at least make these into a highlight table. So when you get over to your actual metrics, right, add some sort of color coding over there to make them more easily see the outliers. So for tables like this, well, another issue is this is scrolling horizontally, which is problematic. So if you can avoid that, do so. Check out Luke Stanke's article on improving tables. He has like 26 different ways to enhance tables out here. He is a Tableau, what used to be called Zen Master. The new title is Tableau Visionary. They give that title to outstanding members of the community. People are doing a lot of innovative work and or helping other users to learn the system. Definitely worth checking that out. And there is a way, you notice on some of these where the value, like there are multiple rows under this 548. If you want that to repeat in your Tableau dashboard, you can go out there and check the link that I had. Now, the next tip has to do with how you can slice and dice your data, and there are multiple ways to do this. Like you can have a fixed hierarchy by dragging one field under another. So like state or province might be under nation, right? So you can expand them. And basically in Tableau, every date is a hierarchy. So if I came over here, see the plus minus when I hover here, this is going to get really crazy when I expand this into quarters, but it should get really, now it's like super zigzag. See if I have another one, this up here. Can we go another level down? That's clocking. There you go. More zigzag. Here's a more zigzag that eventually resolved. So that's one thing you can do. You can also make your hierarchy dynamic. That's kind of an advanced thing. I leave the click there, the link for you guys to check out. Cross filtering. This is a super useful technique. And again, doing this can help you to avoid having to create a table because you can have different information on different graphs and do combinations of them and people can get insights. So the pie chart above here, like if I click on one of these wedges, telephone and communication, this is actually set up to filter every other graph on the dashboard. So I just did one at work that did something like this, where there are date ranges people could click on and then see some clinical information that happened on that date range. You see there, it changes just to paper because that was the one I was on. And you can set up, it's really easy to set this up in Tableau. You can just click on the graph and there's a filter symbol icon right there. You can make it cross filter everything else on the dashboard. Another thing, Viz and tooltip, I did that up here on this graph. I think when I hover, yes. So I have that bar chart. You can put a chart right in a graph. And what's useful in this sometimes is like a top 5 analysis, right? So you might want to know at any one of these points, what are the top 5 product names, right? And you can put them in a little chart right within the hover tip. Filter action is a little bit different. It can be on the same dashboard. Technically, that other one I showed you with the pie chart is one of those, but you could also jump to a whole other dashboard, a whole other tab in your workbook, right? And filter a worksheet on that dashboard. So sometimes that's helpful with a detailed view like this, right? So say I had that telephones from above, right? And I could make a click through and you could see only the telephone orders on another tab. That would be a similar thing to something I've set up in production. URL actions, that's another thing that's useful. If you have multiple workbooks out there on the server, you can invoke a whole other workbook with multiple dashboards and send it parameters by launching a link from one dashboard. And there's some other links, another link here about sets, and that's kind of a more advanced topic in Tableau. Lastly, this point at the bottom is just about filters. Like it's okay to have the filters at the bottom of your dashboard if they're visible, and obviously I wouldn't color them this way. The problem here is, that you would have to scroll to see these, so it's all related to the scrolling. Lastly, here I've included several links to design resources. So examples of what good dashboards look like. Tableau has starter kits. This is a great video, but this Chantilly Jaggernoth is another Tableau visionary, and she has a great video, Design Secrets for a Non-Designer. Ken Flerledge, he is another Tableau visionary, Simple Steps for Better Design. There's live trainings out there, other videos, some science. This is a video by Tableau about some research behind data viz. And this applies to any sort of user interface. This John Jablonski's laws of UX, interesting, and may help guide your design as well. That is the last of my tips with those links to design resources. I will open it up to any further questions or questions about analytics in general. Anything you have. While you guys think about it for a minute, I'm going to jump over. Oh, that's a good question, Martin. I don't know enough about Power BI to make a recommendation. I would just have to direct you to to search about it. I don't know a lot of people who use both. My understanding is this is just very high level. Power BI is a little easier to learn, but Tableau is a lot more powerful as far as how you can calculate things, but that's not much help. Let me show you something real quick here, an example of an infographic. I made this for the, every year Tableau has an Iron Viz competition. And this is the first year that I entered it, and I made this one for this year's competition. And ironically, right after this meeting, they are announcing this year's finalists. So I'm going to jump over there at 12 to see if I made the top 10, which is a very tough goal because it's a global competition. So this thing, you can go out there if you like to, this is based on the original trilogy, and I like to quote this movie, and you can click on R2D2 over here and get a little projection of the help. And each one of these circles is a movie quote, and it just gives you an idea of kind of what you can do in Tableau. We can really do some wild stuff, infographic style stuff versus the standard business dashboard that I just spoken about. Anything else about analytics or my team or anything like that? Thank you, Jess. Area charts. Oh yeah, all this stuff is available on Tableau Public. So just go to my profile and I have links to it. I'm still doing a screen share. Let me show you. Let's look up Ray Givler. I'm the only Ray Givler in cyberspace. You can't lose me. So oops, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, me. So under me, there is featured content. So this is another good one, how I learned Tableau. I have tons of links on that. Here's a Star Wars thing. This is how to make a better dashboard, which I just talked about. Here is Olympic medals. I got a 3rd place in a small competition among the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans in PA. And then other featured content. It's all out there. And if you click on that, it'll take you to Tableau Public and you can get to my other dashboards that are on Tableau Public. You can do some data cleaning and transfer. There's a whole Tableau prep. I don't use that a lot. I do a lot of my prep in SAS, but that does exist. And let me go back here. Area charts. Maria, you have a lot of good questions. Area charts, like I only like to use them for like a single line trend of one KPI, because when I view them, I see them like mountain ranges, okay? And in my own mind's eye, every mountain is going the whole way down to 0. So since I find them confusing myself, I don't use them in dashboards for my user. Again, only if it's one line for a trend and I can shade that whole thing. Sometimes that has an aesthetic appeal to it. You see other questions. Oh, thanks again, Sydney, for the link to my LinkedIn. I'm going to stop the share. If there's nothing else, gang, have a great day, a great weekend, and enjoy the rest of the semester.
Thank you very much.
Take care, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
You.